Keeping up with the young kids is never easy, and as Fernando Alonso lines up this year for his 19th season of Formula One, he should know. He's the oldest driver on the grid, but at 40 years old, he's still surprising people with his razor-sharp reflexes and racing instinct. Alonso is able to race wheel-to-wheel with basically anyone on the grid, which makes you wonder, will he ever retire? Stay tuned as we dive into how Alonso has managed to stay so competitive for so long. Just how old is Fernando Alonso? When Fernando Alonso first entered Formula One, he was racing against Michael Schumacher and Jos Verstappen. That was partly because Alonso was so young, but he had more than proven that he belonged there. At the time, he was the youngest driver to win pole position and the youngest driver to win an F1 race. But oh, how the times have changed. Now, more than 20 years later, he is the oldest man on the grid. He's now racing against Michael Schumacher's son and Jos Verstappen's son. Alonso was already driving while Max was still in nappies. All of this time has built up his experience. He's driven with Renault, McLaren, and Ferrari, and teams are willing to pay top dollar for what he brings to the table. And his hopes of future success are not so far from reality. One of the greatest drivers in history, Juan Manuel Fangio, won a championship when he was 46 years old. So Fernando's still got some time if he plays his cards right. Outside of F1, he's had success too. He has won the 24-hour of Le Mans race twice and is trying to win the Indianapolis 500 to complete the Triple Crown, which involves winning both of those as well as the Monaco Grand Prix. He would become only the second person in history after Graham Hill and write himself into the history books. Not that he needs to. In a study that constructed a complex model for individual and team performance, Alonso was ranked in the top 10 drivers of all time. So there you have it. Scientific proof that old Alonso is one of the greats. Next, Alonso's bad luck. He started out with Minardi and then moved on to Renault. 4 years later, and he had won a world championship. The following year, he won another one. Nothing was slowing him down on his quest to becoming the greatest of all time. He moved to McLaren, and with Ron Dennis at the helm, another title looked imminent. But then, along came Lewis Hamilton. The young British driver was picked to be the new big thing, but Alonso didn't buy it. He was more than happy to have him as a teammate. Well, that was until they started racing. What followed was a bitter teammate rivalry that ended in Kimi Räikkönen clinching the world championship, while the McLaren teammates fought amongst themselves. Then, Alonso tried again with Renault before making a big move to Ferrari. In 2010, almost 10 years into his Formula One career, he fought tooth and nail with Sebastian Vettel for the world title. It came down to the last race, but it wasn't to be for Alonso, and he lost out to the young Sebastian by just 4 points. He came back for more in 2012, but was just as unlucky. At the Belgium Grand Prix, he was just a passenger as Romain Grosjean and Sergio Perez crashed into him at the start, taking him out of the race. Then later in the season, Kimi Räikkönen crashed into the back of Alonso in Japan, causing him to retire from another race. These points definitely added up, and at the end of the season, when he lost the championship to Vettel by 3 points, he couldn't fault himself too much. Coming up, what keeps Alonso going, and who is the young gun waiting to fill his shoes? So don't go anywhere. Bigger than the sport. Like all influential athletes, Alonso's impact is not restricted to the racetrack. In Spain, Alonso's talked about how Formula One was never popular when he was growing up, but with his success as the most successful Spanish F1 driver of all time, the tide changed. All of a sudden, people were interested. The television and the newspapers were filled with F1 news rather than football, which was never imaginable. When Alonso became the sport's youngest champion in 2005, it was the peak of Alonso mania in the country. That's because before Alonso, no Spanish driver had ever won a Grand Prix. The government awarded him with the Príncipe de Asturias Prize, which is the highest sporting honor in the country. And he was even congratulated by Spain's king. When he announced his retirement in 2018, it was a sad day for Spanish motorsport. But Alonso did leave another Spaniard, Carlos Sainz Jr., in F1. Sainz has said that Alonso has acted as his mentor in the sport since he was 15 years old. He even doubted the fact that he would be in the sport without Fernando. So he leaves a legacy to build on for Carlos, but it's not the same for Spain. As Fernando's results declined at McLaren, interest in the sport has also declined. That's no surprise, since in Spain it was found that Alonso had a 99% recognition rating. He probably wouldn't go anywhere without getting noticed. Who is waiting? One driver who is very concerned about when Alonso will retire is Oscar Piastri. He's an Australian rising talent who has, by anyone's standards, earned a place in Formula One. He's won the Formula Renault Euro Cup, the Formula 3 Championship, and the Formula 2 Championship, all in the space of 3 years. He's more than ready to jump into a Formula 1 car, and that's why he was signed to the Renault Sports Academy. During the young driver's test, he out-qualified current drivers Esteban Ocon and Guan Yu Zhou by a decent margin. Ocon was pinched from the Mercedes program and given a seat at the Alpine Renault team in 2020. Guan Yu Zhou was part of the Renault Academy just like Piastri, but Renault secured him a position at Alfa Romeo this year after he guaranteed a considerable amount of sponsorship money. In the meantime, Renault took the unusual decision of sending their driver to a rival team. Piastri is currently a reserve driver at McLaren. That means that if their drivers, Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris, can't compete for whatever reason, it will be Piastri that steps in. But most people think that Renault are sending Piastri away so that he doesn't get frustrated sitting and waiting. They want to show him that they are trying to get him a seat in Formula 1, but there's just no space. That's why Piastri's best shot is Alonso retiring. But Alonso has said that this year that he will keep racing for at least 2 or 3 more years longer. Uh-oh, that's not a good sign for Piastri, and he may have to consider his options. What keeps him going? He may be getting older, but he certainly hasn't lost his desire to win. When he returned to McLaren in 2015, he wasn't given a competitive car, but he made the best of it. His time at the team was filled with engine and mechanical failures, which he complained about to the engineers constantly. Toward the end of 2018, Alonso announced that he would be leaving the sport because, despite that, he outqualified his teammates Stoffel Vandoorne and Jenson Button in almost every race. He couldn't stand the direction the sport was going away from racing and the lack of performance of his McLaren car. It wasn't because he had lost his skill or passion for racing, it was the team and the sport that he didn't enjoy anymore. When he came back in 2021, he was promised a more competitive car beneath him. Even though he is a Formula 1 veteran, he was allowed to drive at the young driver's test at the end of 2020. Unsurprisingly, he was the quickest driver there, but it just went to show that he still got it. He came back to compete at the top. But it's hard to ignore the money. Alonso will take home over $18 million this year alone. This just adds to his net worth of over $240 million, and he sure knows how to spend it. He started a clothing company called Camoa, an e-racing team, and has a whole museum in Spain dedicated to himself. There are over 1,500 cars on display, including go-karts that he raced with, and 300 of them are owned by Alonso. Oh, and the museum has its own karting track and school. That's one way to make a scrapbook, I guess. Do you think Alonso should retire, or has he still got it? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.